Record as well.
Go. While you're recording, and I'll share the screen. Oh, that's what I was writing. There we go. Yeah, so Swati, haha, Swati. It's so windy, man. It's like I found it, and I'm sure the first round, but I found it so difficult to focus on Swati this week. My mind, because the next one I have to post on my blog is Shravan, so I was halfway working on Shravan. I was entering names. I was all over the place. I was just blowing around like the wind. Swati got full control of me. So we're on Swati now. Confucius sayings, right? These nice green reed that bends in the wind is stronger than the mighty oak. Swati's very interesting because it seems so gentle. It's ruled by the wind. It's Saraswati, the goddess of learning and wisdom and all of this. Saraswati in India, all the school children, the schools are all doing like Saraswati things. So she's very, very much connected with that sort of primary education system. She's probably the first god or goddess that children are really taught to worship in that way. But she seems so gentle, Swati, and it's in Libra, and it's this Venusian thing, and you think, oh, Swati's very nice. But it's ruled by Rahu. And so it's a little bit deceptive that way, because the wind can also be very harsh and very cutting. And when you go into it, you find, well, it has to do with this very self-going star. This is very strong independence. And there it is. The symbol for this is like a blade of grass, just one single blade of grass blowing in the wind. And so this is the one out of the many, in a sense. So it's very individual that way. When you look into it, the wind comes in here, you see a lot of people connected with Air Force in this. And the sword, that blade of grass is sort of shaped like a sword as well. And so you see that sort of sense of cutting in here. But the sword also expands, and I see a lot of people in the steel industry with Swati placements. So it's that forging of the sword almost. It's that working with the steel, working with metal. Of course, the Air Force, of course, is also a lot of steel and metal. Some of the people I knew, they were salesmen in the Air Force or mechanics in the Air Force. A lot of them just fly planes. Swati is like the freedom of Swati. It wants to be free to move in all directions, they say. Go any which way it wants. I think they say, no, not in all directions. They say something along the lines, through all the worlds, all the realms. This is why we focus so much on our breath and pranayam, because the Swati, the Vayu is the god that rules us. Vayu is the breath. I probably have it in my notes on the pranavayus, the 5 pranavayus of Ayurveda. And then they're seen a little bit different in the tantric perspective, but these are sort of winds, they're airs, that the only sort of substance that's able to move from the earth to the heavens and back again. And so that's kind of what we're doing with our breath. And we read a lot of, I don't think I have this in my notes, but we read a lot when we're doing our breath to sort of breathe, move the air from the crown to the heart, or the crown to the root, or something like that. But actually, I was taught that there's a 12-finger space above the head, about 12 fingers high. So you could say around 12 centimeters, but about 12 fingers above the head. And we're supposed to meditate the breath going up to there. And so that's the breath sort of penetrating out from the physical realm and through the sort of psychophysical realm and into the heavens beyond. And so this is a big part of what we're doing in pranayama, is working with the vayu, working the prana vayu is what they call it in that regard. So we get a lot of that movement in the winds and going anywhere we want. And that's part of independence, is you're free to go anywhere you want, when you want, at your own time. And it's funny, well, if you look at the picture of Vayu, Vayu is often seen riding an antelope. Well, Migrashirsha is the antelope sign. That's my sign. And now it could be that my moon is Migrashirsha is why I really like Swati people. I get along so well with Swati people. We're really, really close. And so we see that in the symbolism, I think, with that deer, because it's that movement, that sense of freedom that really sort of bridges these two nakshatras. So yeah, we see that kind of thing coming on. And then we get the Maruts. And now I'm doing a little bit more study of just where the Maruts are fitting into Vedic astrology. These are sometimes they're considered like Shiva's henchmen, in a sense, Rudras. You've got the main Rudra, there's 10 Maruts and big Rudra. So there's kind of 11 Maruts they often talk about. And these are even like the winds, the pranavayus, the energies, in a sense, or the prana sort of rides on the wind, is how they sort of often put that. And so you get these different deities associated with that. And that's sort of how Shiva gets a lot of his work done, is through these maruts that ride on the wind like that. Now, the other thing, well, we talk about Saraswati with this a lot. I must have did the research. I wasn't looking at that part when I was going over this, but Hanuman is also very much associated as the god of the wind, son of the wind. So he also comes in. Yeah, there's Hanuman, and Bhima is also like Hanuman's brother. Coral is the symbol of this. I always find this interesting because this is so much associated with the wind, with the sky, with flying in a sense. But here's coral, something that we find at the bottom of the ocean. And so you get that sort of mix. And I think that's also when you're kind of in the water is also another sort of multi-dimensional. You can move in any direction. You get a lot of freedom when you're moving through the water. And it's not sort of obvious in the symbolism here, but I get a really strong sense that there's a lot really strong navigational skills with Swati, that ability to sort of navigate and know your surroundings and know what's around you kind of thing, and be able to find your path, find your way. So we see, well, this is part of Libra, so we see things like traders are ruled here, birds, it says beasts and horses as well. I think that's sort of like horses are a really strong sense of freedom as well. Grains that blow in the wind, unsteady friends. Unsteady friends is interesting in Swati because that's that Rahu rulership here. And so these people are often, and I think this is also why I get along with them, that very risky alliances, they sort of talk about that, unconventional agreements, unconventional contracts, these sorts of ideas. And so I've maybe mentioned this before, but a lot of these, like when I'm traveling, like I've gone to this old bachelor man, me and you talked about this, and that's a little bit of a dangerous sort of person in society. And I find it really funny, especially when I'm in the West, where they're really sort of cautious people in the West. And I'm sitting in a park or I'm sitting in a coffee shop or something, and I'll get these very young people, especially these young girls that are like, they get very curious about me. And I sort of drive that curiosity in people, but they often end up being these swatis. They're looking for this, they're willing to make friends with very unusual people in a sense, and take those little risks to sort of satisfy their curiosity, which they also have a lot of. And also, I think there's a sort of sense of with this and that independence. Now, this is sort of a Venusian sort of independence, but within that independence, they want to sort of grow through others, grow through their connections. And so they don't want to just sort of stick with that same group of friends all the time. They like these sort of one-on-one things like Libras do. And so they're always sort of going out and sort of meeting people and getting all these little sort of one-on-one engagements with people. No, they can be kind of connoisseurs. They talk about that. I do sort of see a lot of these Swatis are in a sense they almost seem to be a little bit high born. They have a little higher sense of taste, and that's probably that Venusian quality again, but it's a Venus Rahu mix. And so it really gets possibly a bit of a foreign sentiment comes into it to play as well because of the Rahu, the unusualness. And again, that's probably why a lot of Swatis are sort of attracted to me. Oh, he looks foreign. He's something unusual about this man, something different. And so they're really kind of looking for all of that sort of thing. They Brihat Samhita talks about like when Saturn is in Swati, these are the things that are going to get harmed. So these usually relate also with Swati. And so we see the bards and the people, basically singers and musicians. And I've noticed also a very strong connection with music with Swati. The winds, the air, the vocalization. We'll have to look and pay attention, but there's probably some flute and some wind instruments and things like that here as well. I think the Rahu will always bring a sort of magnetic quality to Swatis, to a certain degree. But there is that sort of intense vibration that Rahu brings. And so I think that sort of gets channeled into the vibration and things like that we see with music. And because of the Rahu connection, I think we see spies. That's again, that being able to go underground. We talked about the coral and the sailors, which we'll have to watch because I don't remember actually seeing a lot of people on the water with this, but I'm sure like sailing is all wind stuff, and so they'll be there. That sort of thing. Shiva dissolution, Sage Marachi, the shining one, Devas. They're also priests is one of the symbols of this. And so priest or priestess actually. And I think this is sometimes, I think it's in tarot, you see the priest wielding the sword, I believe. And so you get that sort of thing. There's a lot to do with, they talk a lot about justice. Not sure if it's quite justice here or the sense of fairness, the sense of equity that comes into Libra. And that sense of equity, I think, almost becomes like the double-edged sword in a sense. And that's that Rahu that kind of comes into the justice in a sense, metals to make it fair instead of just in a sense. That's a little bit of a difference between Venus and Jupiter, fairness versus justice. So nice thing to meditate on. Nice difference to sort of consider. So it can be very destructive. That's those Air Force people, the metal people working with steel. That's the sword. Wind, we know also can just destroys things. Deva. So there are a little bit sort of holier than thou kind of people, a little bit more refined, these kind of things. Fairly passive. That's that Venusian quality again of the passivity coming out in this thing, but they're butchers is the cast. Is that your hand going up to ask a question? Okay. Go ahead.
I guess I'm curious because we're saying priest, but it's also Artha focused. So is this like kind of the priests that are focused on material gains, kind of like the rich priests kind of thing, like what's the guy that we both kind of are iffy on, the
I think what their duty often
Guru.
is these are the priests who carry out a lot of the ceremonial duties that are more that Venusian ceremony. And so they might do weddings, they might do deaths. They're collecting money. They're kind of the professional kind of priest class in a sense. They make their best money. They're butchers, so they also make like their best money from things like deaths and people suffering and things like that, I think, as well sort of comes through this.
So would like Sad Guru probably have some Swati placements?
I think he
Or like
does.
Osho, maybe even?
Yeah, they might actually. Let's oh, jeepers. Sorry, it's not working with Zoom. There we go. Let me just let's just do a quick tour and see what comes up here. No, Osho doesn't have any. Sadhguru, lots of Hasta and Chitra. Oh, there's a Swati. Rahu and Swati, just like me.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah, the priest, I guess. Yeah, that's the other thing I was saying. My Migra Shirsha and Swatis get along quite well, but I think also with my Rahu and Swati, it intensifies their moon and it brings some intensity to their emotions a little bit.
And
Um,
and having your Rahu there as well means like there's an obsession with that Swati energy, right? Like there's a drive towards it to want to gain it, to obtain it, right?
yeah, there's the magnetic attraction,
Yeah.
and maybe even more so because it's also magnetic. It's also a Rahu sign, and so Rahu in a Rahu sign, he works quite well. Rahu does well in Svati, very well in Svati. But often, like any Libra, Rahu and Libra generally, we talk about it promising too much and making too big of promising. So that's even Sadhguru. That's a little bit of the it might be a little bit of the snake oil salesman oil sort of priest as well, like Sadhguru with his inner engineering, I'll change your life. I don't make these promises to people, but people often look at me like someone who can really change their life and do big things. It's great people pleaser with Rahu there because that Swati wants to be able to move everywhere. And so I've even mentioned, I've talked to you guys about that before, my Rahu and Swati, that people pleasing really helps me to travel because everywhere I go, I just get along so well with people in a sense. And so there's that. Well, we hear the negativity of people pleasing, right? And I do suffer in that regard as well, especially when I was younger. But I really also get a lot of those benefits. I was maybe now also because I'm older, and so maybe someone like Sadhguru also benefited from that in that similar way. Yeah, so that's Rahu and Swati a little bit. So let's come back up.
Yeah, thank you for that sideline. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we might have got there then, but yeah, so we can see my own Swati coming out. So I'm not going to say too much. I mentioned the pranavayus, and here it is. I've got it all laid out, all of that, and more. You could say some little stories from that. That's the other thing, like something like Sera. Sera is the essence. Svati is the winds, the essence of the wind. There's really something about Sarasvati that sort of makes itself the most essential in a way. And I think that's sort of, or getting to the essence in another perspective. And I think that's really, the Rahu has really pushed me in that regard, always trying to get to the essence of a thing. And so we see the essence and the essential come out quite a few ways. I haven't written much, but I've sort of added the essence and the sword that I want to write more on and go a little deeper into, but those are sort of added things. Where are we? There's our Ascendant and Swatis. Let's see who we got here. I should mention as well, I think we'll see what happens, but I think today I might keep it down to about 2 hours. And so we'll clip along a little bit quicker because I think what's happening is the time change now. I'm giving these classes much later in the day from 11 until 2, which is my siesta time, instead of 9 until 11 or whatever I was doing up before 9 until noon. So but I'll be getting really tired that last hour. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I've been wondering, like, why have I been getting? I'm just exhausted in the last hour.
Yeah. And I'm like you too in that way. And I'm just curious right now, like it's pretty much just been me and you the last month in a way, or the last month and a half. So like
Yeah,
did you want to change the time or the day, or was there anything that yeah, you wanted to kind of do to mix things
Thing is,
up?
if I want to change the time, well, I'm going to be moving. I'm going to Saskatchewan on the 13th.
Of August?
Yeah, I'll be there on the 15th.
Ah, cool. How long are you there for?
Very Swati place, Saskatchewan. Um, I don't know. I'll probably only stay for a couple weeks. I'll see a friend in Saskatoon and another friend out in the prairie somewhere. And I'll probably, I don't know how I'll go from there. I'll go to Red Deer and see my mom probably from there.
We're gonna be in the same. I'm doing what's it called? Um, I'm gonna be in Alberta by September 3rd, by August 30th in Youngstown.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're
So yeah,
be,
that's about when I'll be getting to Alberta. So
yeah, we're gonna be close.
yeah,
Cool.
we're getting closer. So
Yeah.
my time change gap will also change then. So
Okay,
we'll
that's fair.
until then.
Okay.
Um, so here we get the ascendant Swatis, and I've mentioned before, if the birth time, especially in Pada 1 and 4, if the birth time's just out by even a minute, it's going to change the rising ascendant. And it won't take maybe a half hour and the whole nakshatra could change. So no, more than that. No, about a half hour in the whole, yeah. So anyway, so here we go. We got these people here. We get Jean-Paul Primeros. He's a NATO general of some sort. I think he was an Air Force man. John Walker Lind. I'm not sure what he did in the army, but he was one of the American jihadists. Spent a bunch of time in Guantanamo, like that. The Trudeau elder has this. I'm not exactly sure, but even as a government and as a prime minister, he was kind of a very independent person. He didn't really let people really tell him what to do too much. We get someone like Cheech Martin up in smoke. And I wonder now, see someone like Cheech Martin, Cheech and Chong from my childhood days. Uh, and that sort of up in smoke thing. And we look at Svati, it's the wind, it's the air, and it's Rahu. And so it almost sort of seems to be like an air pollution. Rahu's giving that dark, thick oiliness to this nakshatra to a certain degree. So we get this sort of thing. We find the other thing, someone like Oliver Stone, a master illusionist. And this nakshatra is also bringing together Venus and Rahu, the guru of illusion and illusion itself. And so there might be some of that that we see in Swati as well. We see Israeli independence was brought on this. We see some other leaders, Narendra Modi acts very independent, Angela Merkel of Germany. I'm not sure who the Pope was. Get some brutal guys like Victor Hugo didn't live a simple, easy life at all. Sid Vicious killed his girlfriend, killed himself. Sex Pistols guy, if you don't know that. Johnny Carson. So I wonder, even there's a sense of, like, you see guys like Johnny Carson. Who else do we have here? Edgar Allan Poe, some poets. That sense of poetry, I think, really comes in here. That flow, I think, becomes very important with this. Emma Goldman, she was an anarchist back in the day when anarchism was kind of cool. Anarchy's not nearly as cool as it was back in those days. And then you get like Samuel Beckett, great novels about death and dying and things like this. Just looking for our airline pilots, our flight guys, our independents. Let's just what do we got here? Oh, Sanjay, my teacher, he's Swati Ascendant. Jenny P, I know she's always flying around all over the place. She does healthcare and wellness. A lot of that kind of stuff too comes up in Swati, sort of yoga. I think it's that flexibility of yoga, and even in their jobs and their careers, they like to sort of maintain a lot of flexibility. Eddie Rickenbacker, I think he flew airplanes. I don't know how many of these people did fly. Uh, Leonard Nimoy, he flew a spaceship. I don't know if he flew flew an airplane or not, but he definitely flew on that. I think Emma Goldman, maybe back in her day, she was flying around on airplanes way back before there was very many of them, and that kind of thing. She did some travels by ship and sea, cycle racers, that wind in the air, that independence also you get from cycling. The horse and vehicles, I think Venus is actually, now we think about it, Venus is said to be a general karaka of vehicles. And so I wonder if this isn't coming out quite strong in Swati. A lot of different kind and unique and sort of original vehicles due to that Rahu placement. Anyways, we'll skip ahead to the sun here. And this is that unusual, very outgoing, very unusual, the way they express themselves. We talk about with the sun there, there's going to be some of that haziness of Rahu coming through a little bit. Might almost seem, I get a sense that Swati people, that combination of Rahu and Venus, they might be like that snake oil salesman who seems to be promising too much. And so you're like, you almost don't trust it in a sense. They're doing too much to seek trust, and so you're kind of uneasy in a sense. And I think that's that Rahu-ness that sort of brings that in, because that's all what Libra is about. It's all about trust. Like that. And maybe they're also a little bit mistrusting as well, which keeps them independent and keeps them going their own way and wanting to remain flexible and open to a certain degree. I wrote about like maybe being the maverick sort of person, a little bit unpredictable like that. Sun is said to be debilitated also in Libra, of course. Sometimes when I'm looking at the nakshatras, I forget about the signs and I'm like just talking about Sun and Swati, but it has that debilitation here as well. And again, that's that haze of Rahu, I think, here. And really, it's that when the sun is flexible, it's not a good sun. It's not a powerful sun in that regard. The sun has its direction. The sun in the sky is actually, it's the big steady. It's not moving around and going all over and doing what it wants. The sun is moving. He's keeping all the order in a sense. And so I think that's part of the reason sun is debilitated in this Swati, because it's too much independence. There's no real order. It might bring a little bit of, say, vata into the way they express themselves, into the light they're shining. There's no steadiness there. Oh, look, Hillary Clinton has this. Like I said, it makes wonderful statement. You can fully put your trust in them, and they really want to do what's best for you. But I think that's part of Swati's energy, even, is that sort of that feel of really, I want to do what's best for you. I want to take care of you. Safety and security sort of thing for the other. And then what the sun is really trying to do is control. And so we get these sorts of things, a lot of compromise as well when the sun is in Libra generally, but also in Swati. Again, they're not steady, and so they always sort of have to compromise something of themselves. And we see that with Hillary Clinton in a sense. We saw a lot of people let's just scroll down here. Saw a lot of people who are sort of like Hillary Clinton. She was always a step behind her husband. She never got to be the president. And quite a few of, I got a sense that quite a few of these people were sort of overshadowed by someone quite close to them. In a sense, they sort of had to compromise some of themselves for that other person who's there, kind of getting all the power, getting all the attention, that sort of thing. And so, of course, then there's all the confidence stuff that gets involved in there. If you're confident, right, you're direct, you know where you're going. You've got like Mars and, or sorry, Sun and Aries can have very one pointed concentration, very focused. Yeah, go ahead.
And I find it's curious as well to compare to your air pollution thing, where Swati is air pollution in the sense that it's not the air pollution itself that gets the attention or gets the focus. It'll be like the factories and stuff, right? So it's like air pollution is never like the main thing. It's always the secondary one, right? So with having that air pollution energy, I think it's yeah,
Mm.
it suits everything else that you're kind of sharing. So it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it's neat that you point that out. And maybe that's that Rahu energy of it. Rahu's cloaking, masking, kind of hiding the truth in a sense, or even the agreements, the true agreement can be hidden, almost that well, we talked about the snake oil salesman, maybe even a little bit of that deal with the devil where you don't fully the full terms of contract haven't been disclosed in a sense. So you don't really know what you're agreeing to in a sense. And that's kind of it is with cars. Oh, wonderful cars. These are great things. Right now we've got this tar spread out all over the world and all this oil refineries and car pollution and the battery pollution and just the list goes on. So that might be some of that energy in Svati actually. It's interesting, yeah. So and we do see a lot of statesmen have this actually. Bill Gates, uh, big time, Pompey. But it's interesting. None of them were full leaders. They all had a lot of power. They were very, very powerful people, incredibly powerful people. Um, but Louis Riel never fully gained power. Hillary Clinton couldn't do it. Pompey, I don't know. He might have ruled Rome for a while, but I think he was always sort of subordinate to Caesar, um, like that. Ma Hotang Pony, I think he's the guy who does all the um, what is it, Alibaba maybe in China. Anyways, he's big time sort of guy in China that way. He's like maybe China's Bill Gates in a sense. You want to look at it that way. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that. These people are sort of subordinate to someone else and every which case, um, which is interesting. Ivanka Trump, I see also. I'm not too sure about some of these people. I know their charts too. I know Terry Rands was a little bit subordinate to his wife. Um, Andrea Celeste is a little bit quite subordinate to her husband, who gets a ton of attention. Um, yeah, so it's interesting to sort of see all of that coming out here. Um, also say one more thing, and I'll get to your hand up because I was looking at Johannes Vermeer, and I'm even thinking of someone like Hillary Clinton. Johannes Vermeer, not much is known about him. The light he was shining was almost from the shadows, and they talked about spies being ruled with this. And so there's a lot of speculation that Johannes Vermeer was a spy to a certain degree. And we see like Bill Gates is doing a lot of shady underground work like that. That would be sort of similar in that regard. Joseph Goebbels, of course, did tons of that sort of stuff. So we get some of that sort of stuff. You had a question?
Yeah, Ma Huateng is a Chinese billionaire that's behind WeChat.
Let's say that again. The what?
WeChat. So like the
WeChat.
Chinese version of WhatsApp there. Yeah, so that's who Ma Huateng is, which I think is appropriate for a Swati, where like they're easing kind of communication in that hazy field of the internet kind of thing, where you're not too sure where WeChat comes from, but it's his main thing, right?
Yeah, you get a lot of the internet guys have this. I'm pretty sure like Assange has this. I imagine like WeChat, this is what Twitter or Elon Musk is wants to become. So I wonder, we'll see, notice if they have this. But there is sort of that yeah, there seems to be a lot of computer engineers seem to have this really good computer networking, social networking and stuff too. Um, is all going on here. So we see Christopher Columbus, great navigators, Richard E. Byrd. I think he flew planes, maybe race cars, but also a lot of sort of navigation type stuff. We see in different, very unique and different ways of traveling and getting on. Dale Evans was race car driver. Guys like this, Ralph Klein was into horses and the horse racing sort of stuff. So it's interesting. There's almost, well, I get a sense, I'm being reminded a lot of Ashvini, actually, with this. And of course, Ashvini straight across, or more or less, the nakshatras are usually half and half the way they overlap each other, but half of this going into Ashvini. And so in a way, those Ashvinis make the perfect partners. It's that Rahu Ketu pairing that comes together. And in both cases, it's almost like the Ashvini person could be doing all the work and getting all the fame and getting all the sort of attention. It's sort of, and Aries people, it's all about me, in a sense. Whereas the Libra person and the Swati person is sort of compromising themselves for that more powerful Ashvini other. And both of them seem to have, like, it's always sort of a shadow partner. There's a lot of independence in both of these two nakshatras, and the partner is sort of like not really sure where the partner is. Like even Bill and Hillary, nobody even thinks of them as a couple anymore, in a way. Like they almost live on completely different worlds. So that's kind of interesting thing about Swati. And again, especially I think with Sun and Swati, because they're really subordinate themselves to others in a lot of ways. It's that almost sense of like when the Sun is in Libra, as the whole world seems to revolve around the partner rather than around themselves. And so they really give a lot of themselves to the partner, to the agreement, to whatever the contract was. Just scroll through Sun really quick and see if we got any neat notes here. Talked a little bit about Johnny Carson. Oh, this is the Sun as well. We have to think that this is also gonna represent people's fathers. And so I think this sort of represents the kind of person whose father might not have been a really big part of their life on one hand, or the father might have been really incredibly like overpowering, overshadowing with their heat, their power. Kind of one or the other of those things is quite likely here. We see in the Ascendant, especially, we see really sort of powerful diplomats. Pompey, Vermeer, I think that's a lot of what he was doing. I'm pretty sure Johannes Vermeer, he was an artist. He was sort of discovered late after his death. He had a bunch of unique techniques that he was using for doing his paintings, kind of right on the cusp of a lot of inventions in optics. And so he's using a lot of this optics, but they say that a lot of the art dealers were happening out of inns at the time. And they were usually, just like today, I think I've mentioned this, is art is like one of the main ways of laundering money. Because, well, here I painted you a painting, thanks for the $1 million. Oh no, I sold him a painting for $1 million. He didn't, I didn't do any favors, honest. So that sort of thing, it's a good way of moving money is through art. But in those days, that was also because all the hidden money was moving that way. It was also where sort of all the black market sort of people, or all the shady, all the spies, all the the money laundering and all that was running through. It's kind of mafia type stuff. And so I think Johannes Vermeer was sort of involved in that to a certain degree. He was in this is interesting. Where's the other one? He's Leeuwenhoek, Anthony van Leeuwenhoek. I think they were a little bit partners in crime, and God knows why history remembers these two people from this little tiny village but we do, and they're still there. But I think they were both kind of, Leeuwenhoek was a little bit more involved with the government and things like this, but I think they were both involved with a lot of shady dealings at the time. So we talked a lot about the shady dealings, Johnny Carson, these kind of people. There's Leeuwenhoek. No, I'm not sure if Leeuwenhoek and Vermeer, I'm not sure about their birth times, but this is what I'm going with. I think I have some basis for rectifying their charts to this. Let's have we looked at Vermeer's chart before? Let's have a quick look at it. He's I like Jonas Vermeer.
Yeah, I tried looking him up. He's a painter.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think he had, there's a bit of speculation when you look into him that he had quite an interesting life. And there was, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot known about him. There's a famous painting of the blast in Delft as well, and that sort of happened in the times of Vermeer and Leeuwenhoek, and it actually took out most of the paintings of one of Vermeer's main rivals in a sense. And so there's a lot of little things like this. And well, for some reason, I rectified his chart to this. And I think that put his Venus up there in the second house to be dealing with art and having the sort of art collections that he had. And very independent and a little bit shadowy. Could really disguise himself. And he might have even had some different aliases that are him as well. That, anyways, we know the alias in history as well, but it's actually him. So all kinds of stuff. And so here's his sun in the ascendant, and it's with Ketu giving even more shadowy, almost able to move like a ghost with Ketu. And the Swati, the sun in Swati, almost able to disguise. Again, it's that being able to sort of disguise themselves, hide themselves. The Ketu highlights all of that. You get his moon, his 10th lord, and moon and Jupiter in the 8th house. And so that's all doing sort of secret work, underground work, Saturn, Mars, everything aspecting that, very explosive, sort of a thing. Might have been his explosive store that blew up, sort of idea, and took out but that was a huge thing in Delft. A lot of paintings, all that, a lot of great masters. The whole painting scene was really big there at the time. But again, I think it's because there's not much known about him. He was very subordinate actually to his mother-in-law. He moved in with them, and she was quite wealthy. And it almost seems like he was always doing what his mother-in-law told him to do. And so we get some of that wealth, that mother-in-law wealth in the second house, and wealth from the partner and things coming through the Venus line that way. And quite a wealthy moon and 8th house generally gives quite a wealthy mother-in-law, and usually quite big landowners as well, the partner's family, because moon here in this case, it rules what's the 10th house, which is the 4th house from the 7th. So it's your partner's lands. And then your partner, that's going into your partner's second house. And so there's big wealth in his partner's family that way. But I think the sun Ketu sort of, even the Mercury, really allowed him. He was kind of a master of disguise, I think, in a lot of ways. And so, like that. We look at Marie Antoinette, she has something similar. Oh, sorry, Vermeer was for first house. We're down to second house now with Marie Antoinette. And I think that's really bringing a lot of the disguise just to the face, the makeup that she wore to a certain degree. This is the person who sounds very confident in what they're saying, but they don't really know to a certain degree, or what they're saying ends up confusing others. Perhaps it's that Rahu that's coming in, that debilitated sun isn't working very strong. Very good chance they're going to have some kind of speech impediment as well, a little stutter or something like that, like Like it's like you're trying to speak and they've got too much pressure on them, too much heat, in a sense, what that sun gives to the second house here. And so the debilitation can give some issues that way. I know Vladimir Poulsland certainly had those sort of speech issues. And I think we would say that about anybody from Glasgow. They don't know how to speak English at all. Um, so you might get something like that going on. Here we go, Ivanka Trump. Right, she's got her son here, and so she's completely overshadowed by her father. She's been very successful in her own businesses, and she's done very, very well. But her dad is Papa Trump, and so what can she do? She's completely overshadowed. Probably has to compromise to what he wants all the time as well. And so that was that really powerful father figure that way. But yeah, go ahead.
Interesting too is I think Donald Trump's a Gemini and her son is in the third house,
Okay, yeah.
which is the house of Gemini, right? So I think that's maybe I
Uh,
don't know.
some of that, so it might be her communications and things like that. Yeah, maybe he's been watching communications for her and things like that somehow. If we think of Swati as being that sort of communicator like that way. But their independence, their authority, their sovereignty is less. There, where Swati wants to move in all directions, they're sort of the sun is burnt. It's trying to maintain somebody else's sort of direction in a sense. It's very interesting. Don't you find it interesting that the sun is debilitated in a sign that means the independent one? I find that so interesting. It's so counterintuitive somehow.
I
So
think I think it makes sense what you're saying with Ashwini because this is like it's the opposite of Ashwini, right? So this is like the feminine version of the sun, whereas Ashwini is like the masculine version of the sun in this axis. Maybe I don't know. This is just
yeah, well here, yeah, it is. Um, we see a name like Charles Koch. It was the Koch brothers, the chemical guys. And so maybe he also had to subordinate to his brother through all of that. These sorts of little things, famous and big and rich and powerful all in his own right, but still unable to go his own way, do his own thing. Ralph Klein, Joseph Goebbels, Picasso. It's an interesting group of people here. Yeah, I'm not sure, like someone like Ralph Klein, for example, on one hand, he was very independent. He's the premier of Alberta back in the 90s, I guess. Really did a lot of the cuts. Again, that's not Svati with the sword, I think, making cuts, cutting, cuts. And so he was cutting the budget. And so these different ways of cutting, I think, also come into Svati and also should be paid attention to. Even we looked at a couple of the movie producers and type guys. Maybe that's that Swati energy making cuts, doing the editing as well to a certain degree. I think that's also if we see if we look at the Ashwini or the Aries Libra sort of thing, maybe it's that powerful sort of ego of the Aries when it reflects back on the Libra personality. The Libra sort of cuts and trims the ego to a certain degree, something like that as well. It's like we use others to sort of perfect ourselves to a certain degree. I know that's sort of my sense, kind of in a way. I go off and be alone for so long. I do some sadhana, I do some practices, whatever I'm doing, and then I come back to society almost to in a way sharpen the sword again, in a sense, sharpen those senses, sharpen those social skills. It's almost the real test in a sense, and so it helps to even perfect my sadhana, my alone time. And so going back and forth like that is sharpening one side of the blade and the other almost in a way. Yeah, go ahead.
And but by doing this as well, it's like an in and out of like your personal training with your sword, where you're fighting with your own mind, and then you come out and you meet someone else that can kind of fight with you, kind of thing. So, and it's what you can learn from them. And I can remember when you first looked at my chart, like you had mentioned something about my Mars and how like in the past you had students with my Mars, but it had there was some conflict there. But then you're like, well, this is the third time with me, and it's like your Saturn have got different, that maybe now you can handle the energy that like my Mars is bringing forward or something like that.
Well,
Because I'm too challenging kind of thing, with my perspective or my Mars.
but the thing is, we've now rectified your chart.
Right,
Mars is no longer in the place where I usually get conflict with students.
right,
So yeah, and so we're not both trying to, if we came into a situation where, say, we were both working on the same construction crew or something like that, for example, then we would find there would be some competition over who's going to lead this show. Then we would find some conflict over leadership, perhaps.
right. And I don't care really. I'll just follow. But like you're saying, it depends on the context in a way.
Yeah. Well, what
Yeah,
might happen, because I also don't care. And this is, I think, part of like Mars and Scorpio in a certain sense. Ketu also in the sixth house, these kind of things. I don't also care, but what might end up happening, say we both got on the same crew, a few guys would really listen to you, and a few guys would really start to listen to me. They would rally around me, or they'd rally around you in a sense.
right,
And so
right.
there would be some, even if we didn't care, there would still come some conflict somehow.
Right, because
So,
we've got that strong kind of underlying confidence that kind of comes out in how we speak as well, with that strong Mars and the Scorpio. Okay,
yeah,
interesting. Cool.
exactly. Exactly. So it would be like, yeah, who's going to be the Mars here? And our Mars
Yeah,
is land right on top of each other. And so, especially in men, there's some competition, brotherly competition sort of thing, which would be very good if me and you ever, just the two of us, worked on a broad job together. It'd be probably turned into a lot of that friendly competition in a sense, where like the job things would just like get done. It'd be finished.
yeah, we'd have fun with it in a way rather than it being a competition, because we don't care about being that. And usually, like, I'll get along with people with Aries placements, or people that have that strong sense of independence, because I don't challenge them. Like you're confident in yourself, so if I tell you something, you're just like, all right, whatever, like you just
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah, there's some little things about your Mars now. Um so that's why we get along, because your Mars isn't actually in the ninth. Um, and so here we see,
Yeah, I don't care about truth as much.
yeah, well, you're not fighting for your beliefs as much anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So yeah, there you go. So here we get Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton. I wrote quite a bit on them. We get someone like Christopher Columbus. Um, few of these others, Larry Flint and Steele, I'm not too sure about. Um, Flint was like real Playboy or something like that, or Hustler magazine, I think, one of those sorts of things. And so he would have had lots of. I get a sense he's one of those guys that did have lots of unusual partnerships, unusual agreements, and probably made a lot of agreements with people where the full extent of the agreement wasn't disclosed. But we also get here with Hillary Clinton and Bill Gates. I think to see the two of them, this is in the fifth house, so that sun is in the fifth house, which usually does fairly well and is pretty good at politics in the fifth house usually. But we talked about that sense of equity or equality that comes out in Libra and Swati. And so here we have the two great champions of equity in the modern day, Hillary Clinton and Bill Gates. And so that's that sort of, again, that debilitated sun. It doesn't really fully understand what's going on in a certain sense. It's clouded. Sun is also our intelligence. And so when the sun is here, they're going to be, Swatis are usually really, really intelligent people. And we can't say that like Bill Gates, okay, he's really intelligent person, but it's like it's like they've got a blind spot in their intelligence. Like they've got this dark spot in there that somehow they're just not seeing the most obvious thing, even though they're incredibly smart people. Like, yeah, it'd be nice to say Hillary's dumb, but look where she got. She can't be all dumb. That sort of thing. So we get Johannes Vermeer here, Caitlyn Jenner. That's interesting to see Caitlyn Jenner here. And I don't remember seeing too many sort of transgenders with this position, but we also talked about that shape shifting of Rahu, that what's promised isn't really there. And I don't know what Caitlyn Jenner, I think she was in the army, so it was a boy going from a girl. And so it's the kind of woman you meet. And while the promises of that being a woman just aren't true, it's much more there that meets the eye. And so that's some of that Rahu situation there as well. Yeah, a lot of that stress of the sun comes in, the anxiety. What's the difference between Mahotung Pony, Tesla, or Elon Musk and William the Conqueror? They're pretty much the same. Julia Roberts, she also almost conquered the world. She was always like Julia Roberts. A lot of the women, I think, with this Swati, they're always with the leading man, right? They're always the second one in the movie. The women are always sort of there to support the man to a certain degree, and that was certainly true of most of Hollywood's years as well. And so Julia Roberts probably really felt that sort of thing. Massive star, again, massive star in her own right, but she's always sort of secondary. Yeah, here we get Louis Riel, and probably for a lot of these people, like Louis Riel has Sun Venus exchange, and so it kind of reverses the debilitation, and so he became the great father of Manitoba, like that. So it became a very nice sort of position for him. Confucius, we got a few like individualism, Max Starner, which sort of post Hegel, existentialism. So that sort of individualism really fits in. Brian Adams almost had that. I wonder if he didn't move to the UK because of problems with his father as well. But he had a lot of that independence. Like he started off as sort of an independent music in a sense, and I think he almost left the music business because he did get kind of too big, and it became kind of he started losing that sense of independence, and that's really strong in here. Oh, there's bikers. There's a couple bikers with this placement, Indian bikers, American bikers. The women that I know with this sun in the 10th house from their moon, they're very independent women. They're kind of models, but again, that's sort of subordinate to the man in all ways. They really always have to have a kind of man there to give them some sort of direction. Those kind of women. Okay, that's I think the most interesting part of the sun here is that all that power they seem to have of wealth. Marie Antoinette, a good example of wealth being destroyed by scheming friends in the 11th house. And this is the ninth lord going in the 11th house. So this debilitation of the sun sort of destroys luck and destroys the friends. And that's sort of what kind of happened with the French Revolution. That's why like Marie Antoinette, she was actually very good. She was always giving away money to the needy, and she had all sorts of charities and things happening like this. But she was big into gambling, and she had no sense of money at all. And so she just kind of lost all her money to her scheming friends, basically at these salons or these parlor events they had. And so we do see, like with her, it comes obvious the sort of corruption of authority. And maybe that's part of this sun debilitation too. And we see the corrupt authority with so many of these people, very powerful, but they're also very corrupt. And maybe it's that corruption that, well, I don't know if it keeps them from getting the top spot, or if it, because they're corrupt, they don't get it, or maybe they don't get the top spot because they can't run their corruption from the top spot. They'd rather have the second spot, the back in the shadows a little bit, like the Rahu likes. So we got a bunch of these kinds of folks. Here we got Moon and Swati. This again, a lot of trade, a lot of negotiation, a lot of very good diplomats, very diplomatic. Talked about the Rahu giving a bit of magnetism. They usually, again, that Venus, music, harmony is really what they're after. Some balance, some harmony, that sense of the sword of justice. There have been a couple judges in the Supreme Court with this. I'm not sure if they're activist judges. Oh, Ginsburg, she's very activist. I think Scalia is the opposite. So two judges on opposite ends of the political spectrum, and I think they're both kind of corrupt. Yeah, as well as two other infamous laws of free speech. Okay, Snowden and Assange. Yeah, here we go with more of those computer guys that have this. Yeah, I knew there was all these guys, but there is that sense of that's free speech. They want to be able to say and do and what they want when they want. We get the padas, and so the first pada of Swati is, it's Aries, right? I saw that. No, it's Sagittarius. This first pada of Swati is Sagittarius. It's that fieriness. It's also that sort of global broad-mindedness to a certain degree. We get.
What was the second one, Mike? Second and third pada?
Oh, yeah, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. And so the padas are just always cycling like that.
They always follow like that?
Yeah. And so
Oh, okay.
we
This is
get
the first time I
into,
noticed that. Interesting.
yeah, we get into Vishaka. Here, I'll just show you, we get into Vishaka. And now we started Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, so on and so on. So, and that, I believe it's the pada that determines the Navamsha. So whatever pada your ascendant Navamsha is in will be your ascendant, your Navamsha ascendant. So we get this, so we also get this like fieriness in the first one here, like fire, earth, air, water, basically is how it always goes. In that way. And so we get these fiery Aries sort of people, or sort of Sagittarius people in the first pada, but they're more looking in that broad way. This moon is probably, as far as the priest goes, they might be some sort of sermonizers to a certain degree. Masters, I wonder if this wouldn't be a sort of master of ceremonies kind of people. And here you get more religious ceremonies or that kind of thing. You had a question?
Yeah, the Navamsha again, it is like auspicious placements or like the rulership in a way. What's the Navamsha again?
So let's look at, let me pull up this chart. I was just looking at his chart yesterday. Sam Walton, Walmart. So he's second pada, so that's Capricorn. So, oh, this is his moon. So his moon should be in Capricorn. And then his ascendant is also the same. So moon and ascendant both bang on.
Oh, right.
Hmm?
Right, I'm remembering now a little more.
So they're both in the second pada, and so they're both in Capricorn this way. Now, Well, what I would usually do is sort of like, now one thing about Swatis is they're born in Rahu Mahadasha. So unless they're born like in the fourth pada, right at the very end of it, chances are they're not going to have a moon period in their life. Same with people born in Mars Nakshatras, or sorry, yeah, Mars Nakshatras. They're probably not going to have a moon period in their life, for example. Um, and so none of these people actually had the moon period in their lifetime, unless there's some that live till really old age.
And this is when your sun is in that Navamsha, correct?
What do you mean when the sun is in the Navamsha?
Like in the sense, like I just
Well, your Vimshottari Dasha, it starts based on the position of the moon in the chart. And so
right.
that's Satra and Pada and everything, and there's sub-padas also come in. So it starts in that position. So if the moon is in a Mars place or a Rahu place, then that the moon period in the Vimshottari doesn't come until they're over 100 years old.
Okay, so that's the case for me. That's why I'm kind of because I'm the Nishta is Mars ruled, I think.
Yeah.
So
And
my moon period only comes later on.
you have to live to like 110 to get your
Right,
100 years old to get your moon period. So
right.
it makes it a little more complicated to research these people because normally I would just look for the moon period of their life and say, okay, here's how moon reacts. Here I'm dealing with, it's nice when it's a full moon 10-year period. When you're only dealing with a 1-year period of moon, if their birth time is out a little bit, then you're getting confused right off the bat.
Right.
Yeah, so it makes it harder to, and I think that's part of the Rahu's masking of the moon in a sense. Even in their lifetime, that moon doesn't get to fully express itself. It stays masked their whole life, basically. So that's kind of an interesting way to look at it as well.
Wow. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Because especially like when in my Western chart, my moon is in the 12th house, which means your emotions never get acknowledged. And now when we're looking at the Vimshatori dashas, it's the same thing in a way, where because my moon, I never bring it to acknowledgement unless I reach 110 in a way. So it's just cool to see the how the languages are different, but you can find the same route.
Well, one of the things also, yeah, it is, and that's often the case. You do see the same, you get the
Yeah,
same result looking different ways in the chart.
yeah.
One of the other things about, well, let's just look at your chart here again. Yeah, so one of the other things about that moon in the 12th house, and you talk about like motions not getting acknowledged, the 12th house is our house of loss. And so a lot of times if you've expressed any emotional thing, it's either seemed like a waste of time, it seemed very futile, or you've actually lost something in the course of doing that.
Right.
And you kind of learn to just keep it to yourself, keep it private, keep it behind closed doors.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Right. And now because we switched the ascendant, it switches into the 12th house for my Vedic chart as well. Whereas before when we used the Pisces ascending, it wasn't. Okay.
yeah. So there you go, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I was gonna look at Sam Walton's chart here. Let's have a quick look at this because he's a moon and ascendant Svati. And so he revolutionized what do you call? Anyways, he made Walmart. He revolutionized the retail experience.
Capitalism.
Capitalism, yeah, he really revolutionized capitalism, just like that. A lot of that was through logistics and supply chains. And you do sort of see a lot of that stuff working in here. And I think it's partially like I start to look at the trines from here because you see the supply chains usually in Aquarius. And so you see that sort of relationship between these air signs and that way. So the logistics and the supply chains really comes here. We talk about like Venus really wants to please, a little bit of a snake oil salesman. Sam Walton could really probably just sell anything. He learned to fly, he flies airplanes. In the early days when he just had a few retail stores in different cities, he started flying back and forth between these places. He started out like basically a very middle class sort of or lower income sort of a person. He went into the army. When he came out of the army, he got into retail. He leased a store. And then right away in the first year, he turned around the sales, like quadrupled them. And the guy who owned the space was like, oh, well, I didn't realize the store could do that well. And he took it away from him and gave it to his son. And so Sam Walton was like, okay, so I have to own the space. And then I think really he branched out from that, and he's like, well, I have to own the whole sort of supply chain, and I have to sort of control all of that. And so in one way, he was this very independent guy, but again, he didn't like to. It's a little bit different than the sun. He didn't like to sort of compromise to the other. He didn't like having any bosses, anyone that he had to sort of rule over. He was very comfortable with his independence. And the moon is very comfortable there. And just very good at business, making deals, very flexible, and maintained a lot of flexibility even in his supply chains. And that's what made him a rich man that I was reading as I was studying him. It's like the top 10 richest people in the USA, 5 of them are Waltons now. And thanks, Grandpa Walton.
And his Venus is in Danishta as well, so he beats to his own drum, right? And then with the sun and Uttara, always
Yeah, Sun and Uttara Bhadrapada, very service orientated.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like he's listening to everyone and he's trying to serve.
Now, there's one thing that I'm a little bit unsure about in his chart, because this is his moon chart, and so this works regardless. But I have a sense, and I just started looking at it, I have a sense this could actually be his real chart, because he maintained a very strong Christian his whole life. And that sense of service was always there. I think that Venus, you got a lot of appreciation for the service. That sort of thing comes out. I think in a lot of ways, the Ketu in the 10th house, nobody really knew what he did. It was almost like magic that he did. He made all this money. He just turned things around. How do you do it? Even I don't know if he could fully explain it. So I think there is some of this, maybe some hasta or some chitra. Chitra is the arrangement of the store in a sense, and doing all that arranging. So maybe he's chitra ascendant or something. So I'm still kind of, some rectification needs to be done, but we're working on it. So that's Sam Walton, and very good for the business stuff. Here we see some, well, even the communications, the radio type stuff. Moon and Swati will see a lot of founders of big companies, Starbucks, Walmart. There's more here. I know there's a bunch more. Where are they though? Maybe they had other placements. No, this was Moon there. Anyways, we'll come to them. So we had some of those big sort of people, very independent. Moon, especially when, well, let's just scroll down here. Especially when Moon is in the ascendant here, because what happens is this Moon rules the 10th house and it goes into the first house, and so these people are very good leaders. They become known, their reputation is as a founder to a certain degree, and then landowners, and you could say different things like this. But then that Moon coming into the ascendant, they're very innovative. They're really pioneers in their way, and so they do very good. Lots of them end up founding the Wu dynasty of China, founder of Walmart. There's a couple more here, I think, too, that aren't on this list, but they've also sort of founded different things. Patricia's founded a school. Oh yeah, Philip. Oh no, that's Gaumont. Oh, interesting. There's a couple people on bicycles here then, because Gaumont, and there's the guy who started Starbucks has this Moon too. And he's also a bicycle guy. Maybe it's the same guy. We'll get to it. Oh yeah, here's Howard Schultz, the Starbucks and the cyclist guy. Again, I'm not sure, he didn't have a birth time. And a lot of these Svatis didn't have birth time. I think it's that Rahu that brings some confusion into the whole thing, brings some unclarity to it, to a certain degree. We had Karl Worf, who was sort of military. Daniel Negreau was poker player. We get a lot, like Avril Lavigne, she was a singer. Jocelyn, well, Tanoa, she's like a blog, what do you call it, a blogger or a podcaster or something like that. Naira also does a lot of good work online and this sort of thing. Nick Sofianos, also a podcaster guy. And Adi B does also a lot of sort of similar to podcasting. I guess it's probably a high-end successful podcast. I guess her husband does that kind of stuff, and she often helps him out on that. And so she's also very flexible with her husband and very, very nice. I think Moon and Swati works almost better with women because they're sort of expected to have that flexibility. Like we said, it's sort of that feminine side of the Ashvini, the masculine. And so like that, we see a couple of musicians, guitar players, all the way through Levine, Walker, Clapton.
Yeah, and like in a way too, like the moon, yeah, that rules over the psychology. Well, you kind of want a wife or a woman or a partner that's got that independent emotional psychology, right? So that the male can kind of work and or the masculine energy can kind of do that work. So I can see how like it's a great partner sign, right?
Yeah, they go really good together.
Yeah, and is Sarasvati like the wife of Krishna some well, obviously she is in some way, but isn't she kind of one of the big people when it comes to being a partner, or is she more the independent
Um,
deity? I don't know much about her.
Sarasvati is married, Lakshmi's to Venus. Sarasvati is married to, I think she might almost be a little bit more independent.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is she linked with Brahma even?
Yeah, that's who she's with, is with Brahma. Yeah, the creator. Yeah, yeah, that's who she's with. So she's with Brahma. And
She needs to be independent while Brahma creates, right? I guess in a way, so it kind of
yeah,
makes
well,
sense.
in the sense that the Devis are sort of the means of creation. So she provides the nature in a sense that Brahma is able to use to create. And so that's often the case, even with the Ashvini Swati, you might get, they're both very independent. They're often separated, but I think the Swati might almost end up being almost like the foundation of the project in a sense. It's hard to separate them, I think, really. They work together very, very well. They almost need that other, even though they're both so independent. They need that other in the background somewhere guiding them, or yeah, being guided. So we get that kind of stuff. I know with Nick, his creativity, it was blocked for a while. He was in a relationship, the mother of his child, and while he was with this woman, his creativity was quite blocked. And he left that, he got his independence again. And he's still very independent, but now he's with a partner who's also quite independent. And his creativity is really just, it's flowing, it's going. He made a big kind of I think it would be called hip hop album. So he's a hip hop guy in Toronto here, just released an album. He might have been involved with Chocolate Groove stuff as well. Album's called Uncaged if you're interested in that kind of thing. So, and that's also speaking to that liberation, that freedom, that sense of independence. But even as independent as he is, it's like he's still getting some of his energy from his partners, right? He's blocked with one partner and more free with another. And so there is that compromise even with the moon, but it's usually not compromising the self like the sun is. It's a more comfortable kind of compromise. So they also, they're very independent, but I find also the women, especially with this, they usually seek out, like it's that, they're seeking out those alliances that can get them ahead in a certain degree. And so the women with this placement, specifically the women, are often looking for partners who will give them not only their independence, but they also have some wealth. And so they can be a little bit independent that way. They're looking for that step up, in a sense, through the partner with this. Yeah, I wasn't sure here, but someone like Steven Spielberg, I wanted to do the research, and Ben Affleck. I'm not sure how much they do this, but I had a sense that they might be willing to moon in the fifth house here because it rules the second. And so they might be interested in investing in like independent artists and independent creators kind of idea. And so I had a feeling that sort of investment might come up. Again, the research needs to be done there, but it seems like a reasonable thing. Steven Spielberg has kind of gone that way in his career. Sought out more independence, although he's quite bound by the money of Hollywood. You get this moon when it's in the sixth house. Now I get a sense that their independence brings them a lot of problems when it's in the sixth house, like Edward Snowden, for example. But they end up talking about a lot of that sort of unfairness and that goes on in the world. Again, like Edward Snowden to a certain degree. But then you get other people like Lady Gaga, and these sorts of people. And again, I think they're sort of become sort of caretakers of the sick, but sort of independent in a very independent way. Again, I'm not sure. This might be some comfortable with war, as Carvelo Creighton was like a Navy man. Edward Snowden, of course, he started off in, was it CIA or it was another department? Anyway, something like that. So you might get them kind of comfortable in that world of crime as well, and underground, working sort of underground asset sort of idea. And I wouldn't doubt if someone like Lady Gaga would be what they would call an asset. And these kinds of things. We won't talk about other people, but I have suspicions there as well. We'll skip that. We don't know too many people with that one. I always find it funny, like there's not a lot of people with moon and Swati. Like some of these positions I go to, it'll be a planet in a specific house or something. There's massive lists of people. And here we're just coming up with a couple people here and there. Yeah, here you get the Supreme Court, the activist judge. Johnny Cash was anyways, Man in Black. I don't know if he was quite the judge, but he did become, I think, a little bit of a priest or a preacher to the masses, to the disaffected masses in a sense. Became a kind of a holy man in his own way. Kind of my way, I guess. Same similar path in a sense. So now we get to Mars and Swati. And of course, when we get Mars, we're going to see, I think, more of the steel work with Mars here, more of the Air Force, more of that aggression. Mars wants to weaponize wherever he's sitting, wants to weaponize the roomies and bring his heat, bring his aggression there, bring his fire. And so in Libra, they sort of weaponize the peace to a certain sense. The negotiations themselves become sort of weaponized. You can see, like, this is the kind of thing US did, for example, when they signed the Minsk agreement. US and Ukraine and Russia, they all agreed to those Minsk agreements. And it was a peace agreement. But the US just sort of, and Ukraine just sort of weaponized that, and used that to buy time to quite literally build up weapons. and that kind of thing. So again, this is that sort of taking advantage of people's good natures. And so these people make very good salesmen, very aggressive, like that. And so we get a lot of different people here. Leopold Brezhnev, he was ruler of Russia for a while. Jack Parsons, engineering. And I would expect to see some engineering here in that aggression of the sword, that aggression of the army in a sense. So army munitions to another way Jack Parsons was dealing with. Yeah. See a few yogis here, a few people who are involved in consciousness community type stuff. Orville Wright, the inventor of the airplane. There's some, would there be some technical skill? There would be some technical skill here or some, I want to say innovation, but Rahu, the Rahu nature of this sort of represents a kind of technology as well. And so Mars is that active, and so they're actively negotiating and very actively trying to seek agreement and using force and possibly threats to get agreement. And I can see that in a lot of these sort of people. They're all a little bit threatening people to a certain degree. Bruce Lee, Ravi Shankar is quite nice. I'm not sure actually. I need to look if that's the Ravi Shankar singer or the Ravi Shankar spiritual leader. I'm not sure, but again, that use of threats to come to agreement. Someone like George Strait, we think of him as the perfect sort of cowboy, but I'm sure he also has a dark side with this Mars. Shania Twain, again, very sort of aggressive to make relationships, agreements, partnership, that sort of thing. Very competitive as well in a way. And this is like for women, this Mars is going to be kind of like the men who are in a woman's life. And so when we see women with this placement, these women really have to be careful about having any sort of good nature, because they find that always gets used against them. And this is what we sort of worry about with, you can say men worry about with their daughters, or we worry about with our partners, is as women seem to be sometimes so sweet and nice and almost naive in a sense, really good natured, and they're sort of, and even feminism sort of rails against the sense of like women were taught to please and to be agreeable and to just sort of say yes. And well, when Mars is in the Swati placement, all those sorts of conditions get weaponized and used against the person. And so it can be quite dangerous position for women, I would expect. Especially, again, it might not be too bad Mars in itself in Swati, but if there's some Saturn aspecting it or some additional Rahu or Ketu aspecting it, it can probably lead to very uncomfortable situations. There seems to be a lot of athleticism here as well, at least for the people I know. Nancy, Leela, Pranal. Of course, then you get Bruce Lee. George Strait, he's an old guy. He seems to still be in pretty good health and must have kept pretty good care of himself in all ways. We start getting a few leaders, like Leopold Brezhnev was he president or the leader of USSR or the military there? I can't remember, but he was quite high. And then we get Robert F. Kennedy. I think that's the Kennedy guy running for power now, isn't that Robert? I think it is. RFK. Yeah. So I think he's running for leadership of the Democratic Party now in the USA. And he was total vaccine skeptic and that sort of thing. And so he's got everybody going against him right now. Nobody likes him. This is something like someone like Lucien Bouchard, also a separatist. I wonder if it's not sort of weaponizing that sense of difference to a certain degree as well. And so we might even see Yeah, I don't know. I was just looking to see if there was any like really obvious racist people here with this Mars, but no really obvious ones anyways that we know about. But we still see a lot of musicians from Ravi Shankar, Marilyn Manson, George Strait down in this. We get some drummers, Dave Grohl. There was another drummer up here too somewhere. I saw him. Um, so all kinds of sort of musicians. I think there can be a big difference. Like these two middle padas, these are both ruled by Saturn. And so I think there's more likely, especially this third one we see, Aquarius. And so there might be that networking sort of sense. But in both of these, I think there comes more sort of sense of responsibility, sense of leadership sort of comes out of them. Than
Like
some.
a work ethic as well, like a more grounded work ethic compared to air, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so all of those things. Well, this is the air one. This is the Aquarius, this third beta. And so it is air. And so maybe it's that intellectualism coming out of the air in some of these people.
Right. And Saturn is air, right? At the end of the day, actually, now that I'm reminded, Saturn's an air sign rather than an earth sign. So that's
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
the long-term vision, I guess, of Saturn is what's coming in.
There is a bit of that cold, hard, facing realities a little bit more that way, where these top people are going to be more theoretical and their standpoint a little less connected to reality, a little bit dreamy, maybe traveling a little bit more. I'm not sure. Orhan Pamuk has an interesting book. It's not a very popular one. I think his popular one was called Istanbul, but he had another one that was he was just taking these buses all over Turkey because the buses there were so dangerous, especially at that time, that he was trying to kill himself, is what he was trying to do. And so he's just taking buses because he was too scared to kill himself. He was trying to do it by bus. And so he ended up being in like all kinds of bus accidents and never died, and then started kind of looking for that thrill and that rush of life in another bus accident. Or strange book. Um, but it's some of that Swati, that movement comes in, that aimlessness of the wandering sort of all kind of comes in, that aimlessness of creativity. Or the yeah. So yeah, we get a lot of smart dudes with the Aquarius side of this. And then we get back, and it's the interesting thing because the middle two are Saturn and the outer two are going to be Jupiter all the time when we get to this, anyways, these nakshatras. So we get the more watery nature there. Someone like Joe Biden and Ron Paul, we're still getting a lot of politicians, that more emotional, maybe that more dreamy, disconnected from reality to a certain degree. And certainly everybody certainly says that about Biden these days. I'm not sure though if we would say that about someone like Joe Rogan. He seems to have this as well. But we get Larry Elder also has this, the radio communications, as well as internet communications becomes quite popular. Brian Adams, of course, was always known from the radio days. But Joe Rogan does have a bit of a watery, dreamy sort of a nature. Like what he's doing is kind of like, well, it's completely ludicrous for this MMA meathead muscle guy to be doing these intellectual sort of podcasts. So there is something also very unusual there. But again, learning, knowledge, all that Sarasvati stuff. Dale Evans, I think, had something to do with schools and education. Oh, this is Mars again, yeah. Oh, yeah, so that's Mars. So yeah, weaponizing the agreements. Oh, that's Joe Biden and his grift. Mars and Swati. So 10% for the big guy. That's probably Biden's Mars and Swati. Let's have a look at his chart for fun. So yeah, that's all under table, all those agreements behind closed doors, behind the scenes. That Mars is totally, it's the oh no, that was Venus, sorry. Anyways, that criminal stuff going on behind closed doors. Yeah, that's totally all the grift is coming through Mars with Joe Biden. All of that agreement, the crime hidden. Um, and actually, because of this, let me just look at this. His Mars and Venus are in an exchange that making the Mars very, very strong, getting a lot of good for it. Moon, he's very comfortable working in that sort of level of crime in a sense. Here we get that Moon Mars, which is the Ashvini Swati combination. And so, well, I'm not sure if it would be his wife who would be controlling him, but somewhere along the line, everybody does know that that Joe Biden's a puppet. And so that may be coming through that to a certain degree. We'll look at Mars. What else is this doing? Well, it's his ascendant lord that's going in the 12th house, which brings some power to the 12th house, but it loses all that power and vitality. A lot of that independence get lost. Sun and Venus is really good, like at diplomacy in the ascendant. Sun gave him a little bit of power. It gives him some strong sense of independence. Very similar to my son, actually. I hate to say it. His is an Anuradha, mine's in Jyeshta. And so he's more likely to be the friend to the hero than the hero itself. But both of them go on the hero's quest together still.
Like a perfect running mate for an actual president.
He would be, yeah, he'd make a great vice president. And so he probably
If only he would have.
What's that?
If only he would have been a vice president. That would have been grand.
Yeah, well, he was under Obama, so he did the vice president thing then, and he was probably pretty good at it. But yeah, that Rahu, and you see the Rahu in the 10th house. I think Trump had something like this as well, for these leaders, and really, especially with Trump, as he was way in over his head, by Rahu, and Joe Biden. I think also just in his job in general, he's always been way in over his head. He's just like, really, he's just this kind of simple doofus car salesman kind of mentality. And well, anyways, elder abuse, right? And that's been going on with him against him for probably 20 years now. He's in it as vice president. So he's got all that kind of stuff working against him. We see nice Confucius here, James Garfield, Lucien Bouchard, some separatists. Of course, everybody says Joe Biden's also separatist. He's sold out to China, sort of idea. Stuff comes out. Right-wing talking points. China Joe. What's the left-wing talking points? Oh yeah, Russia. Trump sold out to Russia. There's on the left. So they each have their thing. What else we got? When I look at the people I know here, even Susan Sarandon, of course I know her, but she was kind of a yogi sort of a person as well back before yogi was popular. But Shiv Code is superpower yogi, Sarah Y is superpower yogi. Actually all these people, Sparrow, Drishti, they're all like superpower yogis. So I don't know about the rest of them. Maybe Confucius was also. Yeah, I don't know. They must work out. They must really do a lot to take care of their health and things like that. They all seem to be quite athletic. There certainly seems to be a strong sense of athleticism. Certainly in the people I know, people like tennis champions and different kinds of people like that. So quite an athletic placement this Mars seems to be. I wonder if it's more, again, it's in Swati, it's in Libra. So I wonder if they're not more looking for that one-to-one competition to a certain degree. Because usually in Swati, the Mars isn't going to be, when Mars is in Scorpio or when it's in Aries, when it's really well placed, that's when these people are competing against themselves. It's like a really healthy Mars. But when you get Mars here, it's not a very healthy one. So that competition is going outward somewhere. There's going to be some jealousy, some competition against the next person. to some degree. So I don't know, Mars in the first house, I got death due to trauma and bleeding to the brain, because this Mars rules the second and seventh, which are the two death houses. And so it's going to have something to do with our death. And I think it was Bruce Lee that died of trauma and bleeding to the brain. And so I just said, well, maybe everybody happens like that for everybody. Because it's not going to be, just look at Bruce Lee's chart, because it's not going to be a good Mars when it's in the first, because I since rectified his chart. So anyways, maybe that's putting his Mars in the 12th. Let's just scroll down to that. Let's see what Mars in the 12th looks like. We've seen a couple of those sort of charts so far. Let's see if this matches Bruce Lee. Oh, there he is. In the 12th, we've got Bruce Lee all over the place. So, oh, that was Mars with Moon. Okay, I see. So that wasn't a rectification. So, well, Mars and Moon isn't going to be very good because it's going to make them very angry to begin with. And actually, in this chart, Mars is a pretty good planet because it rules as Ascendant Lord. But when we look from the Moon perspective, I'll just turn it to that. When Mars goes into a Libra Ascendant, it's not a good planet. It's ruling the two death houses. And so it's often bringing the conditions of death, but bringing them right into the body. And so while Bruce Lee died early by trauma, there's a lot of that. I think the Swati is the independence, a lot of that pioneering, going it alone to a certain degree. And it's just not a good, their anger is not healthy, typically when Mars is in Libra, and their sense of competitiveness isn't healthy. It's like having Mars in the 7th house where you're fighting with your partners all the time. There's always a competition with you and your partner. Great for business, terrible for personal life. So that sort of thing. So Mars, let's open Sartre's chart because I really like him. Jean-Paul Sartre. So we'll look at his chart. I don't know what I did to rectify it, if it's maybe didn't have a time. Okay, so I only rectified it by an hour, turned him into the great, the Mula, philosopher sort of fellow. And he was in the, where are we? There's his Mars up here. So he actually gained, he was in kind of the freedom fighter as well when he was in, during the Second World War. And so he did a bit of that. He was quite well known for that as well. I'm not sure. This is going into his 11th house. And so I would expect, I'd expect he would have a lot of these sort of militaristic friends and have a lot of connections with that sort of crowd and those sorts of groups. Again, we talked about the Swati being a bit of a spy earlier, and we see that here. We've seen it with a lot of the computer guys, kind of independent. And even during World War II, as a freedom fighter, when the Nazis were in town, he was a little bit undercover as well. And so he sort of weaponized all of that, weaponized his good nature. I'm just a nice writer, man. You don't have to worry about me. And allowed to get in past the guards sort of idea. So, and he's got, again, an exchange between the Mars and Venus. Probably going to see a similar exchange with a lot of these people. Because if their Mars is powerful enough not to be a complete jerk and get some notice, then it's going to have some reversal of the debilitation, quite likely. Although we'll meet many jerks, I'm sure, that have this Mars quite strong. So, like Charlie Sheen and Richard Pryor. So they've got this the 11th from the Moon. And again, it's not a, well, because this Mars rules the 5th house, it becomes a good place. So they get celebrated. It's good for investments, things like that. Fast money, fast cash, fast money is what they'll make with this Mars. it aspects the second house. And so that can also like fast money, and I can even save a little bit. But the thing is that Mars burns through money as quick as it makes it. And so that doesn't last very long. And well, they can be very theatrical with this placement because of Mars's aspect to the fifth house and aspect to the sixth house. That's that fighting nature, and that's probably that aggressive nature, take on enemies and face enemies head on sort of idea, or face them anyways, destroy them. And so we see that with several of these people anyways. Let's just keep going to Mercury. I didn't get much written here, but we see a lot of the marketing and Mercury, the rhetoric really comes in here. That flexibility of Mercury, that flexibility with languages. Probably they're going to learn a couple languages. They're going to know a couple languages with this sort of position. And they're trying to, well, they're working in the wind again, like a lot of them are, but Mercury wants to analyze the wind. So we get someone like this Jack Parsons, who's a rocket engineer, dealing with rocketry, and so also having to know the wind and even how the wind is sort of hitting the rocket in a sense. Well, so there's Ray Kroc, the guy who started McDonald's. So we got a lot of those big founders sort of people. Seems to be a lot of intelligence with Mercury and Swati, quite intelligent people. For the most part. Evelyn Mary Booth, a botanist working with plants. There's Kamala Harris, the partner to Mr. Joe. Charles Manson is said to be incredibly intelligent. Johnny Stompanato. You see quite a few of these people killing people, actually. Kristen killed a bunch of patients. Kamala Harris, I don't know, she hasn't killed anybody. She might as well have. Johnny Stompanato killed a bunch of people. Charles Manson killed a bunch. Jan, I think that's Jan Weber. I thought she was a Jan I knew, so I changed it, but I think that's Jan Weber there. There's a couple. Couple of these people involved with a lot of real estate type stuff. Not sure how that fits in with the Mercury Swati. There's a little bit of also a little bit of kind of cosplay here as well, dressing up in costumes. And maybe that Mercury is bringing a sort of sense of fun to the masking and to the hiding. And then I wonder if someone like Corbusier, a town planner, wasn't also sort of bringing some fun or bringing some youthfulness into the town planning, that sort of mask of the city or something like that. See, again, a lot of people were involved in navigation, Air Force, these kinds of things. Krishnamacharya, a lot of yogis. PK is very powerful yogi. I shouldn't say a lot of yogis with this, but a few. Larry T is quite a powerful one. PK is quite a powerful one. Got some boxers like Larry Holmes, Tatchik Nan. So you get a bit of that yoga. That's interesting too, because if we think of Libra, that's what Libra means: yoga, union, bringing things together. Few ashram owners here as well: Mangala, Mandika, Krishnamacharya. I wonder if Max Steiner didn't have something like an ashram. John Lennon, there's the Beatles ashram in Rishikesh. So a lot of very powerful people, actually. King Francis, Joseph Goebbels, Mahatma Gandhi, Prince Charles, Nehru. Nehru was like a founder of the modern constitution of India as well. So Prince Charles, he's the guy that's in now. So I wonder what he'll do. He'll probably, he's got something under his sleeve. Someone like Gavin Newsom as well, very, very charming snake oil type salesman, just like Johnny Carson in a lot of ways, like that. We get more of these like Lee Harvey Oswald. And that's kind of a conspiracy theory. We call him a killer, but nobody's really sure what happened that day. Well, now I've got Carolina P and Carolyn M. I'm trying to remember which one's which. Yeah, so we'll skip ahead. I'll scroll through Mercury, see if we've got anything jumps out. Yeah, it's interesting that the nakshatra Swati also sort of has two sides to it, kind of like we were talking like the Ashwini. And so the Mercury really plays both sides of that nakshatra very well. And actually Mercury seems to do all right in this nakshatra. They're a little scheming and a little bit too clever for their own good in some cases. So we get some of these killers and murderers kind of people. Kristen Gilbert, she was killing her patients to help them. She was wanted to relieve their suffering, for example. I'm not sure why some of these others were killing, but anyways. Tara Reid, that was interesting to see them all together. That was Joe Biden's girlfriend, I think, in the place, but she didn't want to be his girlfriend. That sort of stuff. So anyways, so this Mercury in the first seems to do very, very powerful. You got a lot of very highly placed people. Mukesh, Angel, Caroline. It's interesting to see these people in with all the others because they're quite sort of handy. Like, was it Angel Jimenez is like a handyman, but Carolina P is a she's not cutting boards, but she cuts cloth. She's a designer, a clothing designer. Went to the top schools, sort of clothing designer. And Mukesh Muna, he's an artist, but he works with a lot of mixed media. He's also sort of always cutting things up and pasting them to a certain degree. And so I wonder how much of Swati is almost a kind of cut and paste energy. It's also two sides of that cutting sword, cutting it and then making it stick. Pierre Trudeau, yeah, possibly. So there might be a bit of that energy here. Yeah, that Mercury is always kind of youthful and green. Usually represents cash money to a certain degree, that kind of green as well. And so the second house, good for money. I don't know. Mercury's very good. At counting an account. And so I don't know how good Eminem was at counting and accounting, but I'm sure he got good at it. Yeah, now we're getting into this third house, these cell phone businesses and these kind of things. I don't know how much the franchise goes in with that. Ray Kroc, Gavin Newsom, like, and so many of these politicians, what they did as soon as the COVID thing started up is they started their own testing companies and they started their own vaccine companies. And so they had all these sort of even the mobile ones and stuff like that. And so I think Gavin Newsom certainly was involved in all of that. And so they made a fortune off all of this stuff. Uh, it was all emergency stuff, so it was no, what do they say? Anyways, they just give those contracts away. There was no bid, there was no competition for the contracts. So they did quite well. And that's that third house. This Mercury, when it's in the third house, it rules the second and the 11th house. Those are the two wealth houses, the two main wealth houses. And so all the wealth is going in, it's being invested and made in this third house through the commercial contracts, through business. And with Swati and Libra there, you'd almost probably say commercial contracts, that sort of stuff. Even Larry T, he might be a yogi, but he made a lot of his money with contracts. He was in advertising actually before that. And so a lot of corporate contracts for yoga actually is sort of a path he took. So he made very, very good money through yoga, bringing it to the corporate scene. Kali also does very well. He actually does. I don't know how much this relates with Swati because it's the winds and all of that. But Kali, he deals with aromatherapy, which is, anyways, the scent and the carried with the wind and the essence. And so I wonder also how much there isn't a sense to the essence of Swati, and essential oils and things like that is what Kalia sort of deals with. And he makes really good money for this. He travels to India and gathers up all these things and does presentations. And he's like, he's actually a true snake oilsman salesman. He's like a magician. He's like, step right up, folks. Like he could sell anything, I'm sure. Amazing. Probably Larry could too. Like Gavin, like Gavin Newsom could probably, like these guys can just sell anything. And that seems to definitely be the case here. Can sell anything. So we get in the fourth house. Mercury's always going to have two homes, two senses of loyalties. But I think because it's this Rahu Nakshatra, that's going to be sort of heightened even more to a certain degree. And it might be one as sort of a safe house as well, like you would expect some of these big guys to have. And Joseph Goebbels, I'm not sure if he was one of the Nazis that made it to Argentina or not, but again, a lot of those Nazis certainly had two homes in that sense, and one was very much the safe house. Jawaharlal Nehru certainly had something like that as well. With someone like Meg Ryan, you might look into her movies and we might see if she had a some kind of a safe house in her movies even, or something like that she worked with. What is that? That's 3rd and 12th. Interesting. Because Samasati, she has a small business. It's her own business. It's sort of private contracting for house cleaning and stuff like that in Tofino. And so a lot of people, what they're doing because of the Airbnbs. And so a lot of these Airbnb people, they just hire someone to go and change the sheets and do the laundry and sweep the place out, like that. And so there might be some of that also energy with this Swati, and getting to live in very beautiful places that don't actually belong to them. Squatters, from another perspective. That sort of shadowy housing, in a sense, is how it kind of works out too, I think. So here we get this Mercury when it's in the 5th house, rules the 1st and the 4th house, and so it becomes kind of a Yogarika planet here. And it's in the 5th house, and so very, very powerful Yogarika planet, as we see from everyone here. Taking risks, really analyzing the risks, and so they're not taking any blind risks in that regards. Christopher Columbus, for example, sort of looking for the Indies, but he had all these old maps and he had all these sort of things to study. And and calculating the navigation
And government backing, right?
and government backing. Yeah, King of Spain, I think, supported him, or Portugal, one of the two.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it's Portugal as well. Yeah.
yeah, that first trip was, yeah, it was
Yeah.
um like that. So yeah, and then we even see like the town planning. If we think of the maps and the charts and all of that, Christopher Columbus was working out. We see Le Corbusier also doing that. Mercury is almost trying. It almost seems like Mercury is trying to take some of the risk out of Rahu to a certain degree, through analysis, through information gathering to a certain degree. I wonder, no, Mangala's chart works quite well with this in fifth. Oh, the fourth lord in the fifth. Okay. So I was going to say that this whole Mangala, she runs an ashram. She grew up in this ashram, in this house in the ashram. Her father started it, sort of thing, when she was, before she was born. I guess her father had this ashram for years. And so it's very much like the family land. And it's very much like it's, well, she knows his home. But what's happening now is as India's starting to grow and expand, her father never had any lease for this land. He was just some sadhu who went in the jungle and built a home and built a space. And so this area, her area, is becoming quite touristic now. And so they've started actually throwing a lot of people out of these lands and out of these homes. And it's actually the government owns it. And so she's been fighting and working at it. And she's a pretty crafty girl. I'm not sure she's going to pull it off or not, but that's some of that risk of Swati, I think. And the fourth lord going over there, she's also kind of like a squatter. That's like Christopher Columbus discovering the America. It's like, dude, there's people already living here. And so Mangala is also in a similar area as that. The government wants to come take it, and she's like, "Come on, man! This is my home. This is where I grew up." So things like that. I'm sure Le Corbusier was probably also involved in some of that with his town planning, um, sort of stuff.
It sounds like it's people that are willing to test the boundaries and like the actual physical boundaries, right? In a way of what's there. They're like, oh, nothing specific. So let me put my toe over here and see what's gonna happen, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there is some of that. Yeah, they're always kind of taking too much in a sense. They're, like you said, breaking the boundaries, breaking the rules in some sense. Margot Jersey Girl certainly also really broke the rules and broke the boundaries. Mangala's interesting. She also had a lot of connection with foreign people as she was growing up, because the foreigners were going to stay with her father. And I just met him like he was super old man when I met him, and he died right after that. And so yeah, so she was also like, she has incredible amount of independence for an Indian girl, for an Indian woman. Her father really allowed her to be independent. Great mother. Her mother's like full sadhu, amazing woman the mother is. Um, but yeah, that independence becomes very, very strong. Ability to kind of go in any direction. Um, yeah. I get almost a sense of like we've got some other places that are the compass and some are maps, and I almost get a sense that Swati is almost like the needle on the compass, that magnetic needle of the compass that's pointing. And so there seems to be a lot of things relating with direction and things like that. But again, with the Rahu influence, I'm not sure how much true direction these people have. I think there's always a little bit sort of scattered, a little bit torn, at least in two directions to a certain degree. And so like the Rahu, it's like when you put a magnet on a compass, you fuck the whole compass up. And so I wonder if there's some of that, like I'm trying to figure out where this sense of space is coming from in this nakshatra, beyond the winds blowing in every direction, I guess is about all we get there. So fifth lord in the sixth house celebrated crime, celebrated criminals. That's like Kamala, chief prosecutor, but she loved criminals. She basically had them doing slave labor for her. These sorts of things, wealth from crime, medical supplies, all of this sort of thing. I'm sure Kamala Harris gained a lot also during COVID. These kind of people. I can't remember who some of these people are. Matthew McConaughey, very independent sort of guy as well, doing his own thing, going his own way. Nick Cannon, I think, is also very similar. Reach, also very independent Indian woman, Indian girl. And there's another case of these sort of Swatis getting in touch with me. Richie's this young Indian girl that just like, yeah, really, really likes my work, you could say. I'm going to cruise through this a little bit quicker. I made it past the 2-hour mark and I still seem to have a little power in me.
Like standard mic right there.
Yeah, well, it's just so much, how do you just run through all of this? And I don't know, I guess I could. It's written there. You can read it yourselves. But the thing I like about it is I'm learning actually as I'm talking about some of these. Things are coming to my mind as well. And then your mind and use, and so I'm enjoying myself. I'm getting something. So
Yeah, and it's like, and the way to learn, and I think like this is how we're supposed to learn astrology at the end of the day. It's not supposed to be like take a 2-week course and you're an astrologer. It's about just spending this free time feeling and talking about the energies, like we're going through the traditional way of learning it right now. So I mean, this is yeah, I'm so grateful for this, Mike. So like this is how
yeah,
we're supposed to do it. We get lost in a vortex, right? In a way.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't looked at any of these bad people, killers, the nurse who killed her patients. We got a couple of these people. Prakar Jat is up for, I think that's the fellow up for rape. Johnny Stompanato got killed trying to rape his stepdaughter, or something like that. So here we go in the 12th house. Mercury looks pretty brutal. Let's see what Gian has to tell us. And this is like looking at the charts is really this is it. This is the way to learn astrology. Make these charts yourself and study them a little bit if you need, kind of thing. So yeah, here we get Janine W. So she's got that 8th lord is up in the 12th house. And apparently with this Mercury, it's up to no good. Mercury's not a good planet for this chart. It rules all that unexpected stuff and all that trauma in the 8th, and it's all sort of going behind closed doors in the 12th house. It's also with Ketu, and so Ketu is sort of scattering it, numbing it somehow, sort of thing. But at the same time, Ketu is going to sort of remove any of the, what do you say, remove any of the boundaries from that Mercury, remove any of the boundaries from the 12th house, the 8th house, the 4th house. And so not a lot of privacy in her life. I don't know if she would have grown up in some kind of an orphanage or something like that. Saturn's also going out, and then Aquarius in the 4th, while Scorpios generally tend to move around quite a bit. But her especially, because of this Ketu, is going to have no roots and no sense of home, no sense of grounding. I'm just sort of wondering why she's such a criminal. I think it really has to do with a few things. She's got the Rahu in the 6th house, which is the crimes, so fascinating crimes. I'm not sure what she was doing. This was the killing. Oh, this was the child killer. And so that's Ashvini, which is also very childlike as well. The 6th lord is going into Mars, giving very powerful leadership. With the moon giving a lot of anger, a lot of heat in the mind. Would have been very theatrical somehow. She must have been working with children, maybe.
It interesting as well. Well, Hasta is the elephant trunk, and she choked people, which is what an elephant trunk would do, right? She choked the children.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah,
And
that's it. Yeah. So, yeah, so there's that going on.
she had an abusive husband, an alcoholic husband.
Oh,
And one of the lines you gave for Hasta was work is the curse of the drinking class, but also the like Hasta's motivated by liberation, right? And moksha.
yeah,
So in a way, death becomes that liberation, right? And then through way of the the way of the hand, right? With the elephant trunk, with choking, and then with
yeah,
seeing work and the drinking class of her husband, maybe that all kind of ties in. And
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of wondering. Let me just see something here. So I haven't looked at this chart in a long time. It probably needs rectification. I'm not sure if this was her proper birth time or not. Um, because I'm just thinking, just quickly, I'm wondering if it wouldn't end up being something more like this. And then the crimes are by hand, with Hasta, the sixth lord, going up into the 12th. That Mercury and Ketu in the ascendant. Well, the Mercury would make her very sort of immature person, kind of childlike in a sense. And with the Ketu, also a little bit sort of childlike in her mentality. Um, and very strict. This would be more likely to give the abusive husband with that Rahu and Aries in the 7th. And then Mars going up into the 12th. A lot of changes of the home, transformations, the foundational education.
and Neptune in the seventh also would rule alcoholism in a partner because Neptune is those illusions.
Yeah, well, he could give that. The Mars moon often gives alcoholism, fire water
Uh,
as well. Um,
she had it as well, maybe. Oh no, because that Mars is the husband as well somewhere, right? Or not really.
yeah, well, probably both.
Mars is the boyfriend, right? And Jupiter's the husband.
Yeah, but here the Mars is ruled in 7th house, and so it's also the husband.
Ah,
Yeah. And then, yeah, the Jupiter is usually the husband, the one who gives direction and shows a way. Um, and he might have been, maybe he was, I don't know, because the Sun Jupiter is usually a fairly nice combination, but not up in the 12th. It's going to bring nothing but losses from the husband, sort of thing. And maybe the husband was also choking her, that Hasta. And all the power, a lot of the vitality, the money, everything is going out through Sun and Jupiter, the two father figures. Those two parental figures are draining all of her sort of vitality resources. So it's hard to say. It could have been this chart. We can look for moon really quick too, just to see. So that ends up putting that Mercury and Swati in the 3rd house. And so this might have been working with the groups of children, sort of immature sort of groups. In that regard, no boundaries there, no boundaries with other people in a sense. Then the Rahu aspecting on the ascendant and in the, like Rahu in the 9th house can give a person a very powerful sense of purpose, very powerful sense of mission, but they're confused somehow is the problem. Yeah, basically that moon aspected by Mars and Rahu is giving her sort of some emotional debility in the mind. And then the Ketu with the Mercury is giving some like learning disabilities and some other kind of problems with the mental faculties, I guess you'd say. And so the learning mind and the emotional mind are both damaged in this case. Mercury's also aspected by Saturn. So that's kind of burnt the mind, might have had kind of a kind of autism or something like that as well. Very dry communication. Very, yeah. So yeah, that's really the moon and Mercury is where you're gonna see most mental problems. If they're both very damaged, then those people are gonna have some issues. Let's just have a look at Gilbert's chart here. Another this is the nurse who was killing her patients. And so I think I spent a bit more time rectifying this. Well, that says 1701 and I've got it 701. So I'm not sure what that means. But anyways, we got a serial killer here. I don't know if that's my mistake or my rectification. 1701, eh? Okay. So I'm just gonna flip this to the moon chart so we know what we're looking at a little bit better. Because again, if we're talking about any of these killers, there's going to be mental illness there. And this woman almost seems like the other woman seemed like she might have been a little bit sort of like childlike in her mental illness. Christine Gilbert probably won't be the way. She's got Saturn and Mars both aspecting the moon, and so there's a lot of frustration and anxiety, a lot of anger. Also, the moon is in Pisces, and so it's a little bit dreamy, disconnected from reality, and so probably quite schizophrenic. That disconnection from the reality combined with that Saturn Mars. It's really the angel and the demon over her shoulder. One is always telling her to go, and one is always telling her to stop. And so she doesn't know what to do in that regard. So that's really tough moon this woman has in that regard. And then if we look at her Mercury, she's also got the Mercury Ketu thing going on. And so that's again going to bring some kind of learning disabilities, dyslexia or something, poor memory skills, those kinds of things. The Mercury isn't good with sun or moon. It makes sort of immature way of expressing herself. And here she's also a little bit scattered in that expression. And it's maybe not even making sense to a certain degree. Because of that, we also get, well, that Sun, Mercury, Ketu is all in the 8th house. And so that's all sort of working underground, working in secrets and that sort of thing. Sun is also debilitated there. So lots of tough times there. Rahu's up in the 2nd. Debilitation is in the 2nd house, really like lying people, always telling fake stories. Is really the 2nd house. We store our stories there as well. And so in Rahu there's no truth in those stories. And so she was actually really good at lying, and she got away with killing people for a long, long time. I wonder also if the sun debilitation isn't giving her a sort of abuse of authority, because she was a nurse. She's there to care for the patients, but she was killing them. Like that. Yeah, I've got all kinds of notes on her. And so, yeah, that's what we end up with. The Jupiter, the 10th Lord, going into the 6th house. Well, that was supporting her nursing to a certain degree, but I think it eventually gave her crime. And from a small thing that she probably did a first time, really expanded her crimes. Rahu's also aspecting that Jupiter. So I think there was some, I don't know if it was her, there was some belief, I think she was helping these people. Some sort of that really misguided sort of self-righteousness in a sense. And so she did a lot of damage. She has Venus aspecting this moon and Saturn as well. So there's a certain degree. She really liked her work. She liked working hard. She probably even like enjoyed killing these people and felt like she was doing something really good through it. So it's kind of brutal. Krishnamacharya. Let's just skip ahead to Jupiter and Swati, because now we're dealing more with beliefs with Jupiter, beliefs and their ideals and this sort of thing. And so really, of course, they're going to believe in independence. They're going to believe in all of those sort of things. ahead here. So yeah, so that belief in independence, that belief that they can really do what they want. It's in the it's in again, it's this Rahu Nakshatra that it's in, that Rahu part of Venus. And so Jupiter is going to bring an expansion to their agreements. It's going to bring more partners, more agreements, more one-on-one, more an expansion to the riskiness of the situation. And so this might come involved with, and you look at some of these people like Claudia Schiffer, Nancy Splunger, Sharon Stone, Susan Sarandon. There's almost even Ellen DeGeneres. We were talking about her a couple classes, I think. There's a really more risk in their alliances, but I think even that sense of they might almost end up having a bit of an addiction to that sense of risk, because they always needing more and needing more of it. China, also the wrestler woman, kind of needing that risk and those riskiness and alliances, and maybe even something in their sexual relationships as well. They want to bring in that fear, or they want to bring in some of that sort of kinky sexual, kinky in a sexual nature with this Jupiter. Again, Jupiter can be husband, it can be children. So the women with this placement are certainly going to have very independent husbands as well. I'm not sure. Probably chances are they're going to have more than one relationship because of that sense of independence. Yeah, I can really see a lot in here. A few models that have this placement, but again, models that have been with many partners. Some of those kind of sort of folks. So a lot of relationships here, a lot of boundary breaking, sort of taboo type relationships seem to come in with this Jupiter as well. And again, this is Jupiter is in a Libra sign. He's not friends with Venus. It's not a great placement to have Jupiter in Libra. And then Jupiter is also in Rahu, which is sort of well, Rahu and Jupiter makes what we call a Guru Chandal Yoga. It brings some foreignness or some mistakenness into the beliefs to a certain degree. And so this Jupiter is not going to give great results. Certainly not. It'll give not bad results for some things, materialistic pleasures, but for the ideals of Jupiter and that sort of spirituality and that spiritual purity, it's not going to be great. And we do get someone like Deepak Chopra. Someone was telling me that he's had all kinds of prostitutes and things like that. Shivananda, I think, was also involved in some of that. Of course, he's one of these gurus that seems to have gotten off without too much scandal or controversy surrounding him. But if his astrology chart is correct, then he should have a lot more scandal and controversy surrounding him.
Can we look at his chart? Because I find it similar. Robert Hand is also there.
Yeah. So this is Shivananda's chart. Given time was 2 o'clock with the C rating. And there's this stuff about being born in the first hours of the morning and blah, 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 blah. And nobody can seem to really, I don't know, that doesn't seem to work. Charts at that time don't seem to work. I think it gave him the Saturn, Mars, Rahu ascendant at 2 a.m. And so he certainly doesn't have a Mars, Rahu, Saturn ascendant. So I came up with this because he's the big, weird, bald guy. So he seems very, very Aquarian in a lot of ways and very New Age sort of stuff. He was also sort of a chemist, doctor, working with a lot of the pharmaceutical companies. And so we get a lot of that sort of trying to help and heal people with toxins in the sixth house. there. Where is his Swati? His Jupiter's in Swati. And so that might have been his religion, his spirituality, teaching a lot of pranayama and yoga, and I don't know what all. His focus to me seems to have been on the pharmaceuticals, and I'm pretty sure he was an addict, same as Mother Teresa, and same as a lot of these people who got involved with pharmaceuticals in those early days. I'm sure he was completely stoned on the most of the time. But he wrote a lot of very nice books. And again, I'm not sure if Shivananda wrote all those books himself or if he had students who were writing these books and putting his name on them, same as someone like Farali and some of these other people. He was very materialistic in his early days, before he kind of went the saint path, working in Singapore, yeah, as a doctor. He was also in theater. We talk about the masking of Swati. He was also in theater, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, a lot of his motto was to serve the sick. And so you get that with that Saturn, Mars, Rahu, the Ascendant Lord is going there. This ends up being an exchange between the Ascendant Lord and the 10th Lord, which becomes very, very powerful. And so his service, his ministry to the sort of sick and ailing, really got a lot of power that way. And his Swati, I wonder if this Jupiter didn't actually make him money from the four corners of the globe sort of thing, because Jupiter here ends up ruling both the wealth houses and goes into that luck house, that global house, that broad-minded, earning by his philosophy, earning by his ideology and his beliefs. Let's so yeah, I kept his moon. If I make him any later than this, his moon is going to move into Taurus. And so I kept the moon for some reason. I seem to think it was popular to keep it in Kritika. This makes him the big sort of commander in chief figure, that moon in Kritika. And he seemed to be. He was like the big man wherever he went, in a sense, like that. This brings a lot of all that Saturn, Mars, Rahu. Well, this is the 6th house from his ascendant and the 4th house from his moon. So it's combining that clinic with the home. And there's a lot of action there. Maybe hard for him to really get any relaxation in the home because it's always busy, always people. There's always some changes being made, always some construction being done. Quite a bit of travel as well, and eventually not really fitting in and not feeling very comfortable where he's at. I don't know, that Saturn, Mars, Rahu almost brings a bit of a war into the home. Brings a lot of pretty harsh energies and brutal energies there. Here we get, well, I've seen this quite a bit. When the 9th Lord is going into the 7th house, I see a lot of yogis with this. That's really like that's the placement for yoga philosophy generally. Union, unity. Believes in that sort of unity and uniting things sort of thing, and very hopeful in another regard. And then he gets his Mercury, Sun is in the 5th house from the moon. And so that's a lot of the ceremony and celebration and that sort of thing that went on. So, well, I'm starting to yawn now, so let's just jump ahead to Venus. Yeah, what do I say? About 2 hours and we're at 3 now. So life goes on. So I still need to sort out Venus and Swati. I didn't sort it. But here we get some military, some Air Force people. This is strange. Venus and Swati you would think would be super gentle. But they're really good diplomats in that regard. Again, very flexible and very changeable in a lot of ways. They'll get very risky alliances, especially when Venus is here in this Rahu position. And so risky agreements, Lucky Luciano, probably the same as Stephen Abriel, a NATO commander. We get a few musicians here, of course. Jim Morrison, Avril Lavigne, B.B. King, Neil Young, a lot of that music. Interesting, we got a border protection agency people here as well. Masseuses, yogis. So, yeah, a lot of yogis seem to have this yoga studio. Yogis, Katiana and Francis are both yogis. Yvette actually was a yogi. Bruce Lee, you can also kind of say yogi. Kapil Baba, also a tantric yoga. And that almost might be something here with this sort of tantra yoga with the Venus and Swati, very focused on the union of relationships and the unions of people in a very big way, and really wants to make agreement and wants to make fair agreements with people as well. But this, I think it's more balanced way than the sun is trying to make those. Sun is trying to make the fair agreement by force, by authority, whereas the Venus wants it to really be a win-win sort of thing coming out of it. Yeah, lots of yogis here. Jenny P, Michael D. Michael D, a little bit yogi. We talked about somebody else with what were they living? Anyway, something unusual at the home, something like Shri Webner, Shri W here, and there's some other, where else did I see? Anyways, I know Shir is living, she's Israeli, living in occupied lands. And so that Venus is really looking for the agreement. That way, I think almost to justify the land grab that the settlers are sort of doing up there. And it's interesting because I've got two friends. Actually, I met Shir with this other woman, and they both live on occupied lands in Israel. But Shir is very much a settler, very much like 100% pro Israel, where her friend, who was also living on similar occupied lands, was very much pro-Palestinian. And so that's kind of an interesting sort of a thing. Same occupied land, but very different way of looking at it. The friend is just very poor, and poor Israelis sort of get pushed out onto those occupied lands quite often because the rent is cheap and the costs are all down. And so, hey, you got nowhere to live. Hey, you can go live out here. So, and Shira might also work there for similar reasons, lack of money. So let's look at, I don't know if we've looked at Putin's chart. I don't know if you're aware, he's in the middle of a war, and so let's see what he's got going on. So I've definitely rectified Putin's chart. Putin's a disaster. When you go looking for his birth date, there's different birth dates, different times, different, everything's different. So why I stopped this one, I don't know. But here's where I stopped. I gave him that powerful Mars and Mula, and very broad-minded, global man, but very powerful, very strong, very athletic with this Mars, quite fiery, quite able to deal with theories and a lot of ceremonial duties and things like that. Very good intelligence, thinks of everything with a Jupiter and moon in the fifth house like this. Venus also aspecting the moon. And so very emotionally sort of balanced in a lot of ways. Even though he's quite a fiery character. Now the Venus and Swati is, I don't know, maybe he has gained from diplomacy. Certainly must be gaining something or making some gain from broken contracts and that sort of thing. Gain from war as well. So that might be sort of gain from military anyways, gained from any sort of war. And so he's in a Saturn Rahu period. Interesting. So let's just look at his moon from moon chart just for a different perspective. Oh, that Venus in the seventh house, he's like dated ballerinas and these sorts of things. I'm sure the most incredible, beautiful, dainty sort of women in a lot of regards. And very highly placed. That Mars is in the ninth from his moon, so fighting for his beliefs. The beliefs is really it's who he is, and so by fighting for his beliefs, he's fighting for his own autonomy, his own sovereignty, his own sense of self, in a sense. With that Jupiter, although here's another statesman with Rahu in the 10th house, and so he's completely out of his in over his head. Ketu then in the fourth, a little bit uprooted. It's interesting. I wouldn't think a nationalist like Putin would have Ketu in the fourth, but maybe he's not as nationalist as like some of the nationalist parties, the communist parties and things like this. And he's definitely not a communist, which is fourth house type stuff often represents. And so maybe with this fourth house moon and the ascendant, maybe he would be a little bit more communist or communal thinking, but this Ketu in the fourth will certainly cut all of that. And so Saturn in the sixth, yeah, you can really see the match from the moon. Saturn in the sixth is just stuck in war, stuck in an imbalance for long periods of time. And the sun is there, so quite powerful enemies. And Mercury is there. And so Mercury is really the strategy side of that, all of that Saturn, Mercury, Sun in the sixth house. So excellent strategist for war. Moon Kritika, so kind of natural commander in chief. Mars is in Mula, and so in a way he doesn't care about the consequences of his Mars, and so really quite good at war all the way around. Made to go to war. He's the man. So, and he was also Secret Service and things like that, KGB, before he got into the politics. So now we get Saturn's exalted in Swati. I don't know if it's full exaltation in Swati. Maybe it's exalted. I think it's maybe exalted in the next nakshatra. But anyways, exalted in Libra, generally speaking. And so while Saturn in Libra, one of the magic of this is reason Saturn's so good in Libra is because they keep their promise. You can always trust a Saturn and Libra person. They're very, very, very trustworthy. Because they keep their promises. They're very realistic when they make agreements. It's really sort of nuts and bolts agreements in a sense like that. What else? There is that sort of coldness and the harshness. If you think of Saturn and the wind, it's that cold, harsh, cutting wind. And so you can kind of trust these people, but they might also be quite cold and harsh. But another perspective, we often trust people who are a little bit, what can you say? The person who's a bit cold and harsh, we see them as more honest. And so we think, oh, I can trust that person. That person's being honest to me. They face the reality. Janik Das Narmada down here, he's a Baba with an ashram on Narmada, great scholar, great musician. Eric was a philosophy teacher in Argentina, kind of philosophy 101 type stuff. I wouldn't quite call him a great philosopher, but still interested in that. Why Seal was actually, he was in the Air Force. He was a mechanic built fixing airplanes. And now he's kind of a philosopher. I met him in Guatemala. He kind of wants to do what I've been doing in a sense. Tim Pool's land, he was also in the military and also kind of a philosopher. He was like in the army in Syria, reading tarot cards for everyone at that time, back in the 70s or something. Old man, I think Tim's probably dead now. I met him, he was doing quite rough, and then I lost track. So So that Saturn in Swati is quite serious, you could say, in a lot of ways. Machine Gun Kelly, this isn't the new rap star guy. This is the guy who made quite literally, oh, this is the gangster Machine Gun Kelly. And so that coldness, that wonder if someone like Machine Gun Kelly, because Saturn has consequences, and so there's consequences for not keeping your agreement, your side of the deal. And so then if you don't keep your side of the deal, we're going to send in Machine Gun Kelly, and he'll settle the consequences to a certain degree. Yeah, we got some great saints, Romi, Krishnamurti, Wade Davis. Oh yeah, I really liked a lot of these Saturn and Swati people. Michael Shermer, I think that was Skeptic Magazine. Then you get a nihilist there.
Saturn and Swati makes sense as well, in the sense that, like, for a gangster, because you need to have some sort of coldness and honesty to be a gangster to move your way up. If you're lying to everyone, you can't make it all the way up. So you got to be honest as a gangster with Saturn and Swati, and then you get the long-term benefits of that work, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Well,
that's why there's honor amongst thieves. You know, I got cheated by someone when I was in Guatemala, and I thought, well, they didn't exactly steal from me, but at least if they would have if they were a thief, they would have had honor. They wouldn't have, they wouldn't have robbed me the way they did, in a sense. I remember thinking, oh, they're worse than a thief, actually, even though they didn't steal from me outright like that. And so, yeah, there is that sort of honor there in that way. We think of the independence of Swati. I remember Tim telling me he was in the Canadian Army in Syria well before the Syria war sort of started. He was like, he had all the contacts apparently. But he also did a lot of, like, he crossed a lot of borders illegally at the time, and caused a lot of trouble, a lot of international incidents that he didn't actually get caught for. And that was Canadian Army, so he could have caused a lot of trouble for Canada. But again, acting independent, kind of that maverick in a sense. And if I think even some of these, Mark Twain was very independent, a bit of that maverick. Hugo Chavez also, a little bit of like, they don't mind causing a bit of trouble to be independent, sort of idea. Well, Heidi and Lucy, amazing to see those two names together. Heidi's all neo-tantra. Heidi's also finance. I wonder as well, when Saturn is here, so Libra is trust, and so sometimes that also means like a trust, like a trust bank account, like money in a trust, and having that kind of trust. And so I wonder if this, and I'm sure in a few cases, certainly these people will have trust, but they won't have access to it. Saturn's regulating it, controlling, restricting the trust to a certain degree. It's like even the way that Saturn builds trust over time, you know, and really the best way to build trust is over time with experience. You know, those are kind of the ways we do that. Really amazing to see some of the biggest gurus here: Krishnamacharya, Paramahansa, Shivaji, Rumi. Like, it doesn't get any bigger than that when it comes to gurus. So look quick at Rahu. This is where my Rahu is up. So let's just look at my chart again, because I can really talk for that. So Rahu I've got up in the 12th house, and so that's a lot of the travel, a lot of the foreignness, that fascination with foreign things, that fascination with getting away. Can't get away far enough. Very, very independent. It's interesting because here you get the Rahu Ketu, that Ashwini Swati sort of combination, but it's the shadow planets. So I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm married to God, for example. Whoever I'm married to, whoever my partner is, isn't real. It's almost like shadows I'm negotiating with, with my own mind, in a sense, I got to negotiate with. And so that regards of Rahu and Swati. Because my moon is in 8th house, like I'm full of contradictions, and it really comes out through the sun moon bad angle. But this is a little bit with the Rahu as well. So it's up in the 12th house where it just wants to get away. It wants to close the door. It wants to be private, secretive, all of that sort of stuff. But then it's in the 5th house for my moon. And so it's like, then it wants to get all kinds of attention. And so it's like, for me, I think it's been this, like, I go to India, I go like as far away as I can go when I try to get attention there. I think I might have mentioned this in another class. And so it's not the greatest way of getting attention. I got to get in the middle of everything to get attention. And my Rahu is like, hey, look, I'm in India. Hey, look, I'm off on another planet. I'm as far away as you can possibly be. And so that does two things, because it's like, it's not effective of getting the attention, and it's not actually very effective at getting away either. And so this Rahu is sort of becomes a trickster in a lot of ways, but he can really channel a lot of travel when he's up in that 12th house. So we're at 3 hours. I said I'd do 2 hours. I'm just going to cut this off now. But I had the power, I had the strength, and I could do it. I could, yeah, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had my Wheaties this morning, apparently. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
So
love how it's always like that too. You say, "Oh, I'm not gonna do it this time." You set the bar low, and then you just keep going to that regular flow. You're like, "Oh, I just did it."
yeah,
Usually, I do.
just one drink, just yeah, one for one. Uh,
Yeah.
so I thank you very much for joining me again, Emmett.
Likewise, Mike.
Always a pleasure. Um, and I guess I'll see you next week, like that.
Sounds good. Have a great rest. Take care.
Well, you too. Take care.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave.